week we're going to be covering the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, in my experience as a historian, used to be very boring to me. I'm not particularly concerned about changes in industry. I like people and the study of people. However, as I've come across the years, I've really come to embrace the Industrial Revolution because it was such an influential time in our history, and it really has brought us to the modern day and the technologically advanced world that we live in. The Industrial Revolution really had its origins in the 18th century. Like most everything else we're covering, it has its origins in the Scientific Revolution, the Enlightenment, and really even before that, the Renaissance, as people start to change the way they think about everything. As we go through history, as people start to change the way they think about things, they begin to apply new methods of manufacturing to the industrial world. They think, okay, let's see, we could farm in a different way and get more use out of the land, more food with less work. We can make textile goods with less manpower and in a more efficient manner. How can we do that? People are constantly brainstorming, coming up with new ideas, new ways of doing things that are much more efficient. And that's what the Industrial Revolution is really all about. Applying the ideas of the Scientific Revolution and the Enlightenment to the way we manufacture goods and products. Now, some of that may be very boring to you, but when you really get down and think about it, the way we produce goods that we consume and the way that we consume those goods has an impact on all of our daily lives. We all are impacted by the Industrial Revolution because the changes in industry that we're seeing in the 18th and 19th century directly impact the changes in the modern world and how we do things today in this modern world. So we see the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution really in the 18th century, in the Scientific Revolution and the Enlightenment. That pace of change, as it builds on itself, the pace of change by the 19th century was so immense, was so noticeable, that people at the time began to say, we're going through an Industrial Revolution. The term Industrial Revolution was first used in 1830. Now that's significant because typically terms like this are applied by historians looking at a period after it's over. The Industrial Revolution was so new and such a big monumental event that people at the time said, wow, these changes are us going through a revolution in how we produce goods. So that's a big important factor, that people at the time noticed how much things were changing. Now, the Industrial Revolution gets its start in the Agricultural Revolution. Before people can start changing the way they're producing and consuming goods, they begin to change the way they're producing and consuming food. Now, some of that change in the food in the agricultural industry comes from the Columbian Exchange that we studied before the midterm. This exchange of foodstuffs from the Americas and Europe and Asia. And that really led to an increase in population ultimately, as did the entire agricultural revolution. Once we go through the agricultural revolution, we have a surplus of workers who had predominantly gained their living off of the land, working the land. They now are not needed on the land because people are producing food in a more efficient manner. They're getting more food out of the land with less workers working on the land. So that leads to basically a little bit of an unemployment issue. We have a lot of what we call landless laborers who are now looking for work. They don't really have any marketable skills. They've always earned their living on the land, except that they can make textile goods because they've always made their own clothing. They can brew beer, they can grow food, but aside from that, they don't really have any tangible skills to take into the marketplace. So where do these workers go? Well, these workers begin to find work in the textile industry. And it's the textile industry where we see the first changes in industry taking place. You can go over all of this in the PowerPoint presentation, and it is also covered very well in the textbook chapter that you're reading for this week. Now, one thing that I want you to pay attention to is not just the actual changes in industry, not the machines, not just the machines that were created, but how did those changes in industry and production impact the people? How does it change the lives of the people? From the rich and wealthy all the way down to the lowest the lowest poor people in the city and in the countryside, because we really start to see some drastic changes going on. One thing that we see is a move from people moving from the countryside into the city. We definitely see an urbanization of society at this time because of the Industrial Revolution. We also see the lower and middle class starting to take on the consumption patterns of the upper class. The middle class wants to be like the upper class, and so they begin to start having servants. They begin to start buying goods that will allow them to imitate the lives of the upper class. The lower class people also begin to consume more goods, and as people consume more goods, there is more of a demand for production, and so more goods are produced. But the lower class people also begin to consume more goods, and that changes their lifestyle quite a bit as well. So next week we're going to talk more in detail about what the problems that industrialization cause in society and how people propose to fix those. But this week I want you to focus on the changes in industry, as well as how those changes impacted the people of society and what changes those brought about in society. What problems did those changes in production cause in society? Be sure to look underneath this video will be a list of ID terms for the week. This will start your new list of ID terms for the final exam. The final exam, remember, is not cumulative, so we're starting from the Industrial Revolution till the end of the semester.